everybody, and welcome once again to the Open Mic Writers in Their Own Words, the show where every episode I talk to writers, occasionally editors and agents, folks all from around the publishing game to learn about them, the work they do, and hopefully how their experiences may inform you if you are interested in getting into this crazy world. Before I introduce my guest, please take a moment, hit the subscribe button, whether you're on YouTube or one of the podcatchers out there. That way, you'll never miss a future episode. And if you really like what you hear today, please tell a friend. It is the best way for such endeavors to gain an audience. And I really hope that you'll do that because I like to think that my guests always have something really relevant to share with people who are thinking about maybe doing their own writing. So a nice review is also great too. That also helps folks find us. So I appreciate any or all of those things. So let's get on with it because my guest today is someone with whom most of you probably have at least a tangential relationship. Now, how is that possible? Well, because before he started writing compelling techno-thrillers, he spent much of his career at Microsoft, where he led the creation and development of a little thing you might have heard of called the Xbox. He eventually assumed the role of president of the Entertainment and Devices Division, where he took charge of much of the company's music, video, phone, and retail sales businesses. Since his retirement from Microsoft in 2010, he has focused his time mostly on good deeds like philanthropy, civic advocacy, and for our interests today, storytelling. His first techno thriller was called The WILKES Insurrection. That came out in 2021. That one introduces us to his lead protagonist, then Major Tamika Smith, described as a failed intelligence officer in search of redemption as she goes up against an elusive extremist hell-bent on destroying America. Smith, now a U.S. Senator, is back in his new book, The Blockchain Syndicate, which you're probably viewing or listening to this on right about October 28th. The book comes out on October 21st. Please watch for it wherever you find books. This time, Smith's challenge is even greater and more personal. Her boyfriend has been kidnapped after a school shooting injures his daughter, forcing her to confront a shadowy criminal syndicate aiming to quote unquote fix America their way. With that in mind, please welcome Robbie Bach to the open mic. Robbie, how are you doing today?
Doing very well, Rich. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our chat.
Well, look, I feel like some of this could have, we should have maybe the Law and Order theme song playing in the background because a lot of this feels like it's very much being ripped from today's very ominous headlines with all of the stuff going on in our world right now. For the uninformed, tell us a little bit about the blockchain syndicate.
Well, it's a bit of a combination of what I would call old school espionage and new age cybercrime. And so it has elements of both of those going on. As you described it, Senator Tamika Smith is facing threats. Her boyfriend's been kidnapped. His daughter was shot in a school shooting, and she is trying to sort out why all of this is happening. And there is a collection of villains which have their own set of intertanglements going on, which you'll see as they play out in the book, but who are basically bent on bringing down the government. And they go after, and this isn't giving anything away, they go after the national debt and they go after our financial system. And Tamika Smith and the FBI's job is to try to sort out the syndicate. And of course, the syndicate uses blockchain technology to hide their identities from the authorities. And so there's a technical part to it, there's a political part to it, and obviously there's a thriller part of it, which is the main gist of it. And Tamika is, as always, filled with heroism and faults, and that's what makes her so fun to write.
As all good protagonists are made up. You know, it's interesting to me because right now these days, by trade, I'm an editor here in California. We cover California State Capitol, but for 2 decades previous to this, I worked with LexisNexis and I covered legislatures all
Sure.
over the country. Spent a lot of time in D.C., a little bit around Congress, and right at the beginning of blockchain and where it started to become it maybe not ubiquitous, but certainly something more well known. A lot of lawmakers were starting to introduce bills to make blockchain much more accessible in government finance and that kind of a thing. And of course, the pushback or the concern has always been around blockchain, around how it could be used for more nefarious things. And so I found, that connection to all of this to be really, really interesting. You, of course, come from the tech world. Um, maybe give us a little insight into, and obviously there's a lot more going on here in this story, and I don't want to give away too much either, but because it really does cover a lot of ground and it's very compelling. But you know, I think there are still a lot of people who are very concerned about the role blockchain is playing, and obviously crypto and the technology. Blockchain is the
Sure.
technology behind cryptocurrency. For anyone who doesn't know that, talk a little bit maybe about how that maybe your experience in tech and uh, blockchain in general, how it fits into a thriller.
Well, so the thing I would say about blockchain is it's like many technologies. It is just a thing. It's a technology. It is neither good nor bad. And the challenge with technologies is they can be used for good and for bad. The beauty of blockchain is that it is the ultimate effort at transparency. You can see every transaction that takes place. There's no transaction that can take place in the blockchain that you can't see. The problem with it is, and this is the flip side, is it's also anonymous. And so you can see the transaction, you just can't see the people behind the transaction. And that's what makes it so compelling for a thriller because people can see the things happening. And yet it's difficult to figure out who's responsible. In the old world, a syndicate would have been dealt with phone messages and burner phones and somebody passing messages in an alleyway to somebody to go do something. Now this just happens on the blockchain. And you can see the transactions, you just can't see who's doing it.
This reminds me of something that my friend Jonathan Mayberry has said a lot. He's a great, dark fantasy and horror and thrillers of all kinds. Um, and he's often said that he reads a lot of scientific journals and technical journals, and he
Sure.
regularly sits down with scientists and researchers. And the point being to stay as current as possible with technology and science so he knows what's real out there, what's really being worked on. And that theory is that, okay, if you're going to have that as a backbone of your storytelling, and 90% of what you're putting into your story is something real that people can actually look up and say, hey, yeah, that is a real technology, that he as a writer can do absolutely anything with that last 10%, right? Because so much of it is based in reality.
Right.
Did you have a similar philosophy as a backbone to your work when you started writing thrillers?
Absolutely. I mean, I can appreciate that greatly. I am by training a marketing and business management person. I don't have a deep technical degree. Now, having said that, I worked at a technical company for 22 years, so I am a product person. So I love to engage on the finished product. And so what I'm able to do in these novels is describe the product and describe the action around it and what people are doing with it and what's happening. And underneath it is this technology that is running. It's all real. It's all, I do research it. But at the same time, it has this 10% magic element that as a writer, you can play off of that. And that is super powerful. And one of the characters in both the Blockchain Syndicate and in the Wilkes Insurrection is a guy named Bryce Roskovich, who is a hacker, a good hacker, but a hacker.
Hmm.
And because he has these amazing technical skills, I sort of use him as a vehicle for discussing the technology, the things that are visible and easy for people to understand, and some of the magic that's behind it. And so having him as a vehicle in the story is really powerful. In fact, if you talk to people who've read the books, they will tell you that after Tamika Smith, he's their favorite character, just because he's such an interesting combination of contrasts.
Well, and he's like a moral backbone,
Yeah,
because
he is.
he could use these skills and be just as evil as the bad guys, but instead he's
Right.
using them for good. And so he really does give a counterbalance on a moral or ethical front that, for these other supervillains, essentially.
Well, and for lots of different reasons, he struggles with redemption
Hmm.
and forgiveness. And there's a whole backstory there that starts in the Wilkes insurrection and continues in Blockchain Syndicate. And that's another area for me to explore. I'm a Catholic by upbringing and by practice. And so this idea of forgiveness and redemption and how that interacts with technology and the work he does and the evil that's going on is just another thread that goes through the story. And having these multiple threads that people can pull on, to me, is really exciting.
You know, uh, we're going to talk about redemption here in a minute, but before we get to that, I wanted to ask you because your first book was nonfiction and it was about
Correct.
the Xbox experience. Xbox Revisited is the title of the book, if anyone wants to go check it out. Um, which, of course, that seems like an obvious choice for somebody like yourself with your career history. What inspired you to turn to fiction?
Well, when I wrote Xbox Revisited, it tells the story of Xbox, but it tells it in a very specific lens around strategy and about how we use strategy to fix what was a broken business. And of course, the premise for me as a civic engineer, somebody who's trying to help our society get better, the idea was to apply that strategy to what's going on in our government. And so that's what that book is about. And I love that book. And I speak from it all the time. But when it came time to write a second book, and I really loved writing, and I really discovered that love for writing with Xbox Revisited, I said, do I want to write another slightly linear nonfiction book? And the answer was no, I want to do something I've never done before. I want to create characters. I actually want dialogue in my book. I want to have to describe a scene. I want to invent and create. And so I got started not even by writing a thriller. I got started by writing 100 pages of character sketches about five people in one day in their life. And that one day in their life became the first section of the Wilkes insurrection and how those characters came to interact. And from that came a story. And suddenly I discovered I was writing a thriller, and then the rest flowed from there. So it really was a personal challenge, and I've discovered just a passion for doing it.
Well, then let me circle back to redemption because, as I said, I definitely wanted to ask you about that right from the beginning because, as I noted in the Wilkes insurrection, Tamika Smith, is described as looking for redemption, and I
Mm.
have long thought that that is one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent theme in all fiction, in all writing since well before Shakespeare, right?
It goes all the way back to
Redemption.
the Bible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about how you developed her and how she has evolved over these two books, and maybe in the context of seeking redemption,
Mm.
and how it's affected that evolution as a character.
Yeah, so Tamika started as, I never served in the military. My dad did. She started as my representative in the military. And so I wrote about her life. I did some research on this and I wrote about her a little bit about her military life and one day in her life. And then as I started to get into the character, she was never intended to be the lead character. She was always going to be a supporting character. And then as I got into the character, I got fascinated with, okay, what does it mean to serve? When you go to Afghanistan and Iraq, what happens to you? How does that change your life? And so I started writing her background. And then suddenly, I'm starting creating a background for her that has, pros and cons, ups and downs, things that went well, things that didn't went well, choices she had to make that were difficult choices. And, so I really got into that theme. And so what happens over the course of the Wilkes insurrection and then continues in the blockchain syndicate is she is finding her way back from that dark hole. And she's finding her way back from a personal choice she made that was painful and difficult, that she regrets in some ways, but knows why she made it. And how does she get herself and turn that into a strength? And she is sort of finding herself as a powerful woman, and in her case, as a powerful Black woman. And that is an interesting context in the military. It's interesting in politics, and sadly, it's still interesting in society. And so that creates a really intriguing character to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's stick with characters here for just a second because, you have some very bad people in these books. Um, and honestly, some of them are the epitome of what I think a lot of us out in the world see these days as the evil tech bro that's
Right,
waging war on society. I'm not going to name any names. I don't think I have to.
right.
But tell me a bit about how you create these folks and specifically how you keep them three-dimensional. How you keep them from becoming almost cartoonish because I think it's so easy sometimes to have especially bad guys be almost like, you can see them twirling their mustache, right? They're just the classic, evil guy with no depth to them, but these guys have depth. And to me, that's a challenge. So how give me a little bit of your philosophy about creating these kinds of characters.
Well, first of all, I start with a little bit of a broad belief. So my broad belief in particular in the blockchain syndicate is there are two types of antagonists in these books. One is in the what I would call the Cold War era. So this is old school espionage genre, and the other is in this new age techno cybercrime area. And of course, the techno person comes from my background interacting with Silicon Valley. And I'll be honest, I know a lot of venture capitalists who are wonderful people. Some of them are good friends, but I know a lot of people who are there to make money, and that's their only goal. And so they'll do what they need to do to make money. And so that's where I started from, a person whose only goal is to make money. And then the important thing you have to do, I think, as an author, is you have to write the backstory, even if you never put it in the book. And so, why did that person end up that way? In this case, Lee Bowen. Why does Lee Bowen end up the way he does? So you have to write his backstory. You have to know his upbringing, his parents, how he got to where he got to, etc. Nastya Andropov is another bad character in this book. She has her own backstory, and it's those backstories that enable them to be independent of each other because
Hmm.
their motivations are slightly different. Their intentions coming in are different. And so the way they resolve problems is different. Um, and, so that's why for the Wilkes Insurrection, the first draft of that book was 570 pages long. For what ended up being a 350-page book because I put all the backstory in the book.
Yeah.
And what I had to learn was no, the backstory forms the character.
Yeah.
And then the author's job is to expose that in small little tidbits so that people frame that character in their head and understand why he or she acts the way he does. And so I think backstory is super important.
That is such a great point to be made here because I have been told by numerous authors that because I'll often ask, well, what do you think was a mistake? What would you do differently if you had a chance to do it again? And a lot of them have said, I would not have started out trying to write a novel. I would have started out trying, writing short stories and,
Right,
really built up to that because a novel is so unwieldy and it's such a longer time commitment and et cetera, et cetera. And that they wish they'd started with something smaller to build the writing muscle in a more gradual way. Was
right.
there ever a time in writing either of these two novels where you felt the same way, like, why did I take on this task first instead of writing something shorter?
Well, I to be to be blunt, not really. I there were times where I said, "Oh gosh, I have to cut 200 pages. That's a pain. Why do I have to do that?" And so, you leave your best children on the floor, so to speak, because the floor in the writing room is littered with really good writing, but it's not stuff that's going to be included in the book. So I didn't enjoy that part of the process, but I've always been written a lot of blog posts. So if you go up to my LinkedIn account, you'll see, I don't know, 50 or 60 blog posts. That is my short equivalent of a short story.
Hmm.
How in 1,000 to 1,500 words can you say something meaningful that people will actually take time to read, but which is encapsulated around an idea on its own. One of the things I've started to do now while I'm, a little bit of a writing pause is I'm writing letters on LinkedIn. I've written 5 of them. And the first one was directed to my parents, then to my kids, then to my generation of people, then to Republicans and Democrats. And these are letters about what's going on in the country right now. And so for me, that's sort of the equivalent of a short story. I'm writing the grist of what could become a theme or a plot line or something in a future book. And I love doing that. I love that short form. I never really thought about it, honestly, until you asked the question about that being the equivalent of a short story, but I suppose in some ways it is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a whole idea is getting an idea out there in a way where you make your point in whatever the format is, and yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable. Of course, we've talked a lot here. Of course, you came from the tech industry. You've noted a few things, but I'm curious too. Were there Are there other principles uh, from your time at Microsoft or since around in your speaking and teaching that you've taken to your writing? What are some of the things, whether it's discipline or anything else that you've taken that you've been able to apply to your writing and that's helped make you successful?
I think there's a whole bunch of things. Certainly the idea around hard work I take from my time at Microsoft. When I joined there were 3,500 people there. When I left, there were 100 plus thousand. And you learn quickly that there's a lot of smart people at the company, a lot of difficult challenges. You need to put in the time and the effort. It doesn't mean you have to work long hours necessarily, but you got to be smart about it. You got to really put in the effort. And learning to write was required effort. I had to write some stuff that was bad. I had to throw some stuff out. I had to delete 200 pages. And so this idea that, putting effort in matters is really important. The second thing I learned at Microsoft is creativity. And that may sound a little funny, but you can't run the Xbox business for 10 years and not see some amazing creative endeavors.
Right.
The biggest thing that happened while I was there was the creation of the Halo franchise.
Hmm.
And while, as a game dynamic, the gameplay is incredible, the multiplayer is great, the online gameplay is incredible. There's a story to Halo, and it's a good story. There's been several books written about the Halo universe. And so this idea of creativity really comes back to me in a big way. And then the final thing I'll say, and this will maybe surprise you a little bit, this idea of civic engagement maybe has always been a little bit a part of me, but Microsoft was an incredibly civically engaged organization. I mean, Bill Gates's mom was chair of the United Way nationally,
Hmm.
and the organization for as long since before I joined there has had a month of giving, and they do employee giving on a scale that I don't think any other company does. I think this year, I think the number I saw the other day was something like $300 million of employee directed giving, which is a pretty crazy number.
That is a
And
crazy number.
so this idea of being engaged in the community and giving back, ironically, maybe a little bit of it comes from my church background, maybe a little bit comes from my parents, but some of it came from my time at Microsoft. And frankly, a little proud of that.
Well, yeah, along those lines. Now, you've referenced it here a couple times in this conversation, but you refer to yourself a lot as a civic engineer. And
Right.
as I referenced, you left Microsoft 15 years ago, so a lot of what you've done since then has been aimed at philanthropy and teaching and that kind of a thing, and specifically noting, your role as a civic engineer. Explain a little bit about what you mean by that and what kinds of things that entails.
Well, basically, when I think of civic engineers, I think of people who are trying to make their communities, whether it's a local community, a city, a state, heck, a country, they're trying to make their communities a better place. And they're trying to engineer how society is working so that it's better for everyone. And so when I step back from that, I say, well, how does that happen? Well, It can happen by running for office. Say you want to run for your local town council. It can happen by volunteering at your church. It can happen by, as I have, joining boards of organizations that you think serve people at incredible scale. I've been on the Boys and Girls Clubs of America board for over 20 years. That organization serves 4 million kids. They do just incredible work in almost every community in the country. And being able to participate and support that and help that and give them a little guidance and a little feedback, I know has impact. Today is Habitat for Humanity Day. I have 4 Habitat for Humanity meetings today. And they're in 60 plus countries and they serve millions of people, trying to give everybody a decent place to live. So that's civic engineering. That's helping. And people can do it in small ways or big ways. And I'm
Right.
lucky Microsoft gave me the opportunity to do it in a bigger way, but small ways matter.
I think small ways matter almost more than big ways. And I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, obviously if
Yes.
somebody can donate
Yes.
like what Mackenzie, Jeff
Scott.
Bezos' ex, that's Mackenzie Scott, thank you, what she does. I mean, things like that are epic. But so much of our life, as someone who's covered politics for a very long time, I got to the point for a long time, like where, we'd be at some kind of gathering, my wife and I, and you get the dreaded question, oh, what do you do? And you tell somebody, okay, well, I'm a political journalist, and Jesus Christ, I get 20 minutes of their political opinions, right? So I got to where I didn't even want to tell anybody, right, what it is I did.
Sure.
But what I finally figured out, the best response I could give when people would give me some kind of reaction is, well, let me ask you a question. Who's your local city councilman or county supervisor? Who's your mayor?
Right.
Do you know who your assembly or Senate representative is here in California? Do you know who? Because the reason I'm asking those questions is those people have more impact on your life than anybody in Congress. Now, I get it. Right now, all politics used to be local, according, to um, Tip O'Neill, but now, it's all become national. But at the end of the day, if you want a stoplight in your neighborhood, if you want a speed bump in your neighborhood, you need zoning changes or, whatever it is, that's your local government and that's you. That's your impact be felt right there. And I tell people that all the time. And to me, it's the same thing with anything else in life. If you want to get involved and lend a hand in whatever way it is, that will have more impact in your world than sending $100 to somebody in Congress. That's
Look, I 100% agree with you. The irony of what's going on in DC right now is it's basically going to devolve all decision making to states and localities.
hmm
And so your state and local representatives are suddenly going to become way more important. I think the most powerful people in the country right now are governors. And
hmm
the second most powerful people in the country are mayors of big cities. And so
Yeah.
having that local influence is super important. I just quickly, a small example. I live in a town called Medina. It's a small little town. And I'm on the local Boys and Girls Club board, and we wanted them to support us in building a new clubhouse. And so I went to 5 Medina Town Council meetings, and I got to know all the council members. And you talk about the benefits of it, and they ask questions, and sure enough, they donated money. And the city contributed because they knew it was important for their citizens and for the youth in their area. And I do think, to your point, that is the way good things get done. George Bush said 1,000 points of light, and I think there's some truth to that. And those points of light all start locally.
Yeah, 100% agree. Um, okay, so veer my way back here to writing fiction. Um, we talked a little bit about characters, but for me, I know in my own work, my own fiction work, the hardest thing for me when I got going was plotting.
Mm,
Right, again, I'm a literal guy in that regard, right? When you've been doing what I do for a long time, it's just facts and everything. So creating stuff out of whole cloth, I always thought of myself as being this very creative person, right? And then you go to do this in a long form way and you realize okay, it's so literal and so linear that it absolutely is boring to read. Well, how do you build tension? because that's the thing in fiction, and especially with thriller or crime fiction, what I write, noir, any of these things. But whether you're writing a Western or romance, it doesn't matter. You've got to
Sure.
build tension. And so it took me actually quite a long time to learn how to plot things and pace things and do them in a way that kept the reader interested in every single chapter, right?
Sure.
And the interesting thing is, so my agent just had an editor who didn't buy the manuscript, by the way, but told me, or relayed to her, the plotting was excellent in this, right? And there's all these reasons why books do or do not get. But I thought that's like the greatest compliment I've ever been given in my life, right? This New York agent or this New York publisher said, "Oh, we really liked the plotting. This was really clever." And I'm like, I mean, I'm doing the happy dance, right? Because it was the hardest thing I have ever done in my literary life. Long-winded way of saying, okay, what was your big challenge here when you started writing? You talked maybe a little bit about some things earlier, but was there ever something where you just wanted to high five everybody around you when you felt like you maybe got it right?
All right. So, two things you should know. One, the way I plot is I do not outline. So, the first thing I write is a prologue, which is a scene that I envision in my head that takes place three-quarters of the way through the book. And I write that. And then everything in my plot is to get to that scene. So you understand that's things are organic. The second thing I do is I change voice pretty much every chapter. So in each
Yes.
chapter, you're in the head of a different character.
Yes.
Now, what that does for me is it enables me to um, keep the reader engaged because suddenly they go from Tamika's head to Bryce's head to Johnny Humboldt's head to somebody else's head, and so that kind of keeps people going. And B, it enables me to kind of shift my own creative energy because now I've got to plot that particular person and what they are
Mhm.
saying and how are they going. The problem I ran into was not plotting. I'm a devious person, I guess, by nature. So I guess I was able to figure that out. The problem for me was voice
Yeah.
because when you're changing voice in every chapter, you have to be careful that the person whose head you're in actually knows and can see what's going on in the chapter.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll write something and my editor will send me back and said, she doesn't know that. How can you write that?
Right.
And I have to go, oh, wait. Tamika can't be in a meeting with Johnny and know exactly what he's thinking. It just doesn't work that way. And so getting that right, that took in the blockchain syndicate was by far and away the biggest range of editorial comment. And in fact, I ended up adding, in this case, almost 5,000 words as a result of mostly voice and enabling that to work correctly. So yeah, that's a challenge for me, and I'm getting better. But as you say, it's you just got to keep chugging away at it.
Yeah. It makes me think of Paul Levine is a really great crime fiction writer. He's been on the show a couple of times, and he had a long series with one character. And I asked him about, what was it's a kind of a similar question. And he said, well, the hardest thing is to not put things into my latest book that I subconsciously stole from one of my earlier books. And he said that's where his editor would say, that's a really great paragraph or that's a really great line. I
But you
loved it the
wrote that.
first time when you wrote it in in this book. So, we all have our different challenges, right?
Well,
that was
here's the other thing that was challenging for me. I'll just add to that is writing a sequel
oh yeah.
because you have to write something that is fresh for the person who read the first book and who knows all the background and comes in and doesn't want to hear all that repeated. But you have to be able to pick up the blockchain syndicate not having read the Wilkes insurrection
Yeah.
and have it make sense and have the characters make sense and all that kind of stuff. So figuring out that transition, that was a little bit of a Rubik's cube for me to sort through.
Yeah, I imagine. So this is probably a quick answer question. Since this book is so focused around, some nefarious characters who have all these great technical skills, was there anybody from your time in the tech industry who became a model for your, and you don't have to name names, but became a model for anybody in your books?
No, I think there are some attitudes in the industry that became background material for some of my characters. I think the tech industry is filled with some people who have sort of these prototypical background ways of looking at the world, and I stole some of those for sure. There isn't anybody. One of the things I find in my characters is they're an amalgam of experiences. So Lee Bowen is an amalgam of experiences in my tech venture capital wanderings. Tamika Smith is clearly an amalgam of experiences. She and I have exactly nothing in common from a background perspective. And so I've had to pull from a lot of different places for her. Um, and so what I try to do is think of things in prototypes, not in people, and
Got
then
it.
go from there.
What makes for a great thriller for you as a reader?
Um, the thing that makes a great thriller for me as a reader is I get to the end of a short chapter, and I think thrillers should all have short chapters. I think long chapters are hard for a thriller. I get to the end of the chapter and I want to turn the page. I can't, not, you always say, well, thriller, you can't put it down. To me, the test is you're in bed at night, sleep, getting ready to go to sleep, and you read a chapter. Can you then stop and put the book down? And if I can convince people, oh, to read 3 extra chapters before they eventually just fall asleep out of exhaustion, then I've succeeded.
You've hit it. You've hit it. Um, Last serious question. What's next for you? Of course, the new book just comes out on October 21st, as I noted.
Yep.
Are you working on any more? Are you taking a little pause? Where are you at right now?
Well, I will take a pause between now and the new year, mostly to focus on doing what authors don't necessarily love doing, which is promoting the book. And I have a series of board meetings and a series of travel coming up, so I'm going to be pretty busy for the next couple months. And then sometime in mid-January, I will write another prologue, and I will imagine a scene that fits with my view of the contemporary world we live in, and put that scene down on paper, and then say, "Hey, can that form the basis of a plot?" And Tamika's story is clearly not done. The way the Blockchain Syndicate ends, I don't think that'll surprise people. There's an ending for sure, but it's not the end, and so there's more to come.
Excellent. Well, if you have not read either of these two books, I suggest you go check them out. In the meantime, I always like to close on what I like to hope is a fun question. I always mean for it to be a fun question. I'm going to make myself this omnipotent person who can put you together for whatever, dinner, drinks, conversation with one of the following three people. Who do you choose and why? There's usually a little connective tissue between the options I'm going to give you. You'll probably figure it out pretty quickly. I hope I don't massacre this name, but the options I'm going to give you. The first one is Louis-Jacques Mondé Daguerre, who most of us know was the modern inventor of the daguerreotype um, precursor to the camera.
Sure.
Eli Whitney or Hedy Lamarr. I could put you together with one of those three folks. Who would you choose and why?
Oh boy. Um, so you're going to have to help me on the history. Eli Whitney's the inventor of the cotton gin, correct?
Yes, correct.
And I probably would go there. And the reason I'd go there is because the historical time, the period in American, I mean, you think about these things, the cotton gin, depending on how you draw history, led to a civil war.
Yeah,
And it's a technology that is inert by itself, was good for business, and yet ultimately was involved in one of, the darkest eras in American history, in my opinion, anyway, and ultimately led to a civil war. That to me is getting in the mind of that, and what did he know? What did he not know? How did he think about the invention? Was he just, I don't know anything about Eli Whitney. Was he just an inventor?
right.
Did he have any point of view on the world? Um, And if he, I'd want to ask him, I want to meet with him in about 1868 and ask him if you had to do it over again, would you create what you did?
Well, yeah,
And
because
see
when
what
you
he would
think
say.
about any of these things, so obviously the daguerreotype led to all the kinds of modern photography, etc., that we have today. The
Sure.
cotton gin led to the textile industry and all everything that's come since then. Hedy
Yeah.
Lamarr, the things that obviously she was an actress, but was involved in so much technology, including what became the basis for modern Wi-Fi and everything that we use now. That's
Right.
those were history-changing inventors.
Yep.
If anyone missed out that connection, it's the inventor aspect of it. So, yeah, I'm a huge history guy, and I love knowing the backstory on things like how did something evolve and become what we know it as now, So that's always a
Well,
fascinating thing for me.
here's a book. Have you read The Last Days of Night?
Oh no, I have not.
All right. So The Last Days of Night is a book by Graham Moore, who mostly writes theater, but has written some books. And it's historical fiction, but it is about the creation of the electrical system in the United States. So it's
Ah,
Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, Westinghouse, Alexander Graham Bell, and a fictional woman in the middle. And it's an excellent story. It's great historical fiction, but it also gets you in the head of these inventors, which was to me just super fascinating.
yeah.
Um, it's a really good book.
I will absolutely check it out. I'll give you one.
Yep.
It's nonfiction, written by an author that lives here in this area. It's called The Accidental President, and
Ah.
Harry S. Truman.
Oh.
I'm trying to remember. It's The Accidental President, Harry S. Truman, and the 4 months that changed the world. That's what it is. 4 months that changed the world. AJ Blame is the author. Things, again, I'm a history guy. Things I did not know, that was never taught in school about when Harry Truman became president upon the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1945. I had no idea that he had been kept in the dark about so many things, including America's nuclear program. When
Right.
he suddenly had to go to Potsdam and deal with Stalin and Churchill, there were so many things he was so unprepared for, and yet the those 4 months changed the course of human history in ways that I'm not sure are replicable. So it's a fascinating book. It was so good. Uh,
I will definitely read this. If you want the longer story in Harry Truman, read David McCullough.
oh yeah.
I mean, that book, he's my favorite biographer, and his book on Truman and his book on John Adams were both spectacular.
I used to get out of my previous uh, journalistic endeavor that I was at for 20 years. I traveled around the country a lot, and I was at a convention in Philadelphia one time, and David McCullough was the keynote speaker for one of the days. And that man came on stage and spoke for 90 minutes extemporaneously, no notes, nothing on the Continental Congress and I mean you could have heard a pin drop in that. There was probably at least 1,000 people in this convention center, and it was, other than his voice, you couldn't hear a thing. It was so compelling. Not only was he a fabulous writer, he was a fabulous speaker. And yeah, you're right. I have not read that, but I really should because it's great.
It's he's John Adams, that book anyway, and it's about that time. I mean, it's all
Yeah,
about the Continental Congress and about
yeah,
what's going on there.
yeah.
Um,
A lot of insights I'm sure
Wonderful.
we could glean to today. So
Oh, yeah, no kidding.
anyway,
Um,
well, Robbie, thank you so much for coming on the Open Mic Writers in Their Own Words. I wish you big success with the Blockchain Syndicate. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights into your process and everything that went into writing this book and the Wilkes Insurrection as well. And we'll all be keeping an eye on what happens from here.
Fabulous. Thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to leave you all with the same thing I always leave you with, which is if you haven't hit subscribe, please do so. That'd be great. As I always say, the best thing to do is tell a friend if you know somebody who's interested in writing and thinks maybe they want to take their shot at it. This is a great way to learn from a lot of people who have they're walking the walk right now, and you can do it for free. You don't have to go out and spend a bunch of money on on craft books, etc. So if you like the show, please tell somebody about it. As I always say, if you didn't like the show, just keep it to your damn self. You don't need to tell anyone about it. And other than that, tomorrow is not promised to any of us, so whatever you do, make today count. Until then, for my guest, Robbie Bach, and for myself, Rich Eisen, this has been the Open Mic Writers in Their Own Words. We'll see you next time.